The night Claire opened the door. She had been dividing things in half for so long that she no longer thought about it. A box of crackers became 4 small piles. A can of soup became 4 bowls. 1 chicken breast, pan-fried with a little garlic salt, became 4 plates, each one carried carefully to the table, each one set in front of a child before she sat down herself. And when Marcus looked up at her that Tuesday morning, the way he always did, and asked, "Aren't you eating, Mom?" Vanessa Carter smiled the same smile she had been practicing for years. "I'll eat later, baby." He was 8 years old and already knew what that meant. The apartment on Wycliffe Avenue was small, even by the standards of small. 2 bedrooms shared among 5 people, a bathroom where the hot water took 4 minutes to arrive, a kitchen window that looked directly into the brick wall of the building next door. But it was theirs. Vanessa had painted the girls' side of the bedroom pale yellow the summer before she and Marcus had done it together on a Saturday, getting more paint on themselves than the wall, laughing until Danny woke up from his nap and started crying. She had framed a drawing Sophia made in kindergarten and hung it above the dresser. She had learned which floorboard creaked and how to step over it when she came home from her night shift at the hospital so she wouldn't wake the kids. It wasn't much, but she knew every inch of it, and it knew her. The letter from the property management company arrived on a Wednesday. 14 lines. The building had been sold to a development group. All tenants were required to vacate within 21 days. There was a phone number to call for questions. Vanessa called it. No one answered. She didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she had never been able to afford. Instead, she made a list. She was always making lists and started at the top. She called every rental listing she'd bookmarked. She drove to 3 apartments in one afternoon, Lily on her hip and the other 3 trailing behind her like ducklings. At the first place, the landlord took one look at her children and said the unit had just been rented. At the second, a woman in her 60s told her the building had a 2-person maximum per unit. At the third, a man named Gerald said he'd think about it and would call her back. He never did. She kept the list. She kept calling. On the 5th day, she found a listing for a house on Belvedere Boulevard, 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a price she could just barely make work if she picked up an extra shift each week. The landlord's name was Robert Hale. He sounded reasonable on the phone. He asked her a few questions: employment, income, how long she'd been at her job, and when she answered each one steadily, he said, "Come by Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. She ironed her blouse the night before. Saturday came cold and gray, the kind of October morning that smelled like rain that hadn't decided to fall yet. Vanessa pulled up to the house on Belvedere at 9:58. It was a solid brick house with a covered porch and 2 oak trees in the front yard, their leaves gone orange and red. She sat in the car for a moment and let herself imagine it: Marcus shooting a basketball in the driveway, Sophia and Danny in the yard, Lily toddling across the porch. She let herself want it, just for a second, before she got out of the car. Robert Hale was already on the porch. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s, wearing a fleece vest and holding a travel mug. He nodded when he saw her coming up the walk. Then he saw the children. They came out of the car one by one, Marcus first, holding Lily's hand, then Sophia and Danny, both bundled in matching green jackets, because it was all Vanessa had in their size that was warm enough. 4 children, ranging in size from 8 years old to barely 2, all of them well-behaved and quiet, all of them looking at the house the same way their mother had looked at it from the car. Something shifted in Robert Hale's face. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel, exactly. It was the kind of shift that happened in people who had already made up their mind and were now just searching for the right words to wrap around it. "Walls are pretty thin in this place," he said, not looking at her. He was looking at the oak trees. "Neighbors have complained before about noise. Young kids, you know how it is. My children are very well behaved," Vanessa said. "I don't doubt it." He took a sip from his travel mug. "It's just the floors too. Original hardwood, 1940s. Lot of running around. It starts to show wear real fast. I've had issues before. Mr. Hale, I think it might not be the right fit," he said. Final. Settled. The way men said things when they had decided and didn't want to be questioned about it. Vanessa stood on the front walk of that house with its oak trees and its covered porch, and she felt something move through her. Not anger, not yet, but something quieter and more permanent. She had heard variations of this speech 5 times in 5 days. She knew exactly what it meant, and exactly what it wasn't saying. She looked at him once. She didn't plead. She didn't argue. She had learned a long time ago that there was a certain kind of closed door that didn't open no matter how hard you knocked, and the only thing left to do was turn around and walk away with your head still attached to your shoulders. "Thank you for your time," she said. She turned, gathered her 4 children, and walked back to the car. Marcus didn't say anything until they were 3 blocks away. Then, from the back seat, "We're not getting that house, are we?" "We'll find something else," Vanessa said. She kept her eyes on the road. The calls started that afternoon and didn't stop until close to midnight. Vanessa sat in the driver's seat of her parked car, outside a Shell station on Summer Avenue, the engine off, the heater running on the last quarter tank of gas she had. The kids were in the back, Danny and Lily asleep, Sophia drowsing with her cheek pressed against the window, Marcus sitting upright with his arms crossed over his chest, watching the gas station's fluorescent lights like they might tell him something useful. She worked through the list. The first shelter told her the family intake beds were full. There was a wait list. 3 weeks, minimum. The woman on the phone was not unkind. She sounded tired in the way that people sounded when they had been delivering the same news all day, and she gave Vanessa 2 other numbers to try before they hung up. The first number rang 12 times and went to voicemail. Vanessa sat with the phone against her ear, listening to it ring, and stared at a crack in the dashboard she had been meaning to fix for 2 years. The second number connected to a recording that said the organization's emergency services had been suspended pending a funding review. She called her sister, Angela, in Cordova. Angela picked up on the second ring, and Vanessa could hear her kids in the background, the TV going, the particular noise of a full house. Angela listened, without interrupting. Then she said, "Vanessa, I want to help. I swear I do. But we've got Kevin's mother here through the end of the month, and the landlord already gave us a warning about occupancy." Vanessa told her it was fine. She told her not to worry. She hung up before Angela could finish apologizing. She called her mother. The phone rang a long time. Her mother answered, sounding foggy with sleep, her voice thin and papery the way it had gotten since the last round of treatments. Vanessa said, "Never mind. She just called to check in." Her mother said, "You sure?" And Vanessa said, "Yes, very sure. Get some rest." She put the phone down and looked at her children in the back seat. Danny was mouthing something in his sleep. Lily had her head tilted at an angle that looked uncomfortable, but that she seemed to have no objection to. Sophia's eyelashes were still wet. She had cried quietly for 20 minutes after the house on Belvedere, and Vanessa had let her, because Sophia was 6 and entitled to cry about things. The Emergency Housing Assistance Line had a recorded message explaining the application process. Submit documentation. Allow 5 to 7 business days for processing. A caseworker would be in touch. 5 to 7 business days. She looked at her bank account balance. $211. Enough for 2 nights in a motel, maybe 3 if she found something cheap, but not enough to hold as a deposit anywhere. Not enough to bridge the gap to her next paycheck. Not enough to be the beginning of anything. She thought about spending it, and then thought about what came after she spent it, and she put the phone in her pocket, started the car, and drove. Overton Park was the only place she trusted in the dark. She had brought the kids here 100 times. She knew which paths were lit, which benches were sheltered from the wind, which corners of the park stayed quiet. It was 3 miles out of her way, but she drove it without hesitation, because familiarity was its own kind of safety, and she needed every kind of safety she could find tonight. Overton Park at night was a different place than the one her children knew. In summer, it was all green light and laughter, kids on the climbing structure, dogs running loose on the grass, the smell of someone's grill going nearby. In October, past 10 o'clock, it was just dark shapes and the sound of wind moving through bare branches and the distant noise of traffic on Poplar Avenue. She pulled into the lot near the east entrance and cut the engine. She had been here with the kids 6 weeks ago. Marcus had climbed to the top of the jungle gym and stood up there with his arms out like he was about to fly. Sophia had found a caterpillar on a leaf and carried it around for an hour, showing it to everyone who passed. Danny had eaten sand, which was not a first. Lily had fallen asleep in the stroller, with an ice cream melting in her hand. It had been an ordinary Saturday, the kind that didn't seem like anything while it was happening and then later became the thing you held on to. She got the kids out of the car as quietly as she could. Marcus was awake and understood without being told that this was not the moment for questions. He took Lily's hand while Vanessa lifted Danny, still mostly asleep, onto her shoulder. They walked to the nearest bench, a long wooden one under a tree that offered some shelter from the wind, and Vanessa arranged them as best she could. She took off her own jacket and laid it over Danny and Lily. She wrapped Sophia inside her arm. Marcus sat at the end of the bench, back straight, ankles crossed, looking out at the dark park with an expression that was too old for his face. "You should sleep," Vanessa told him. "I'm not tired," he said. She knew better than to argue. He was her son, after all. The cold came in slowly, the way it did in Memphis in October, not a single drop in temperature but a gradual tightening, like the air was being pulled taut around you. Vanessa tucked the jacket closer around the little ones and pressed her lips together and thought about nothing. She had found over the years that thinking about nothing was a skill, the same as any other, and that sometimes it was the only way to get from one hour to the next. Lily woke once, just briefly, and looked up at the sky with an expression of mild curiosity, all those stars above the park, the branches moving, and then closed her eyes again. Danny didn't wake at all. Sophia made small sounds in her sleep, words that didn't quite form into anything. Marcus sat up straight all night. Vanessa watched him from the corner of her eye and felt something break open in the center of her chest, quiet and thorough, the way old wood split along a grain. Not despair, something more specific than despair. The knowledge that her 8-year-old son had appointed himself a night watchman because he understood, in the way children understood things they weren't supposed to have to understand, that someone needed to stay awake. She reached over and put her hand on the back of his neck, the way she used to when he was small. He leaned into it, just slightly. He didn't stop watching the park. Claire Hale had been attending the First Methodist Ladies' Auxiliary monthly dinner for 11 years, and for 11 years she had left by 9 o'clock. Tonight, she had stayed until nearly 11 because Barbara Chen was going through her second divorce and needed someone to sit with her while she cried into her decaf, and Claire was not the kind of woman who left a crying person alone at a table. She took the Poplar Avenue route home out of habit. She had driven it so many times that her hands did it without instruction and turned into the park shortcut on East Parkway the way she always did when traffic was light. The road curved through the east edge of Overton, 2 lanes of asphalt lined by old trees, quiet at this hour. Robert was at a client dinner and wouldn't be home until late. She had the car and the quiet and no reason to hurry. She almost didn't stop. The bench was at the edge of her headlights for only a moment, a glimpse of shapes in the dark, the particular stillness of people who were not passing through but staying, and her foot moved to the brake before her mind had fully processed what her eyes had seen. She pulled to the side of the road and sat for a moment with the engine running. Then she turned on her high beams. The light fell across the bench and the tree and the 5 people arranged there with the specific, practiced closeness of people who were trying to share warmth. A woman, 4 children, the smallest ones tucked under a jacket that was too thin for the temperature. A boy at the end of the bench, sitting upright, who turned and looked directly into the headlights without flinching. Claire got out of the car. She was 52 years old, a retired school administrator, the kind of woman who had spent 30 years managing the chaos of other people's children and had developed an instinct for when something was wrong that operated well below the level of conscious thought. She walked toward the bench with her keys still in her hand. The woman looked up when she heard footsteps. Her face was guarded in the way that faces got when they had been surprised too many times by things that turned out to be bad. Claire stopped a few feet away. She looked at the woman mid-30s, exhausted in a way that sleep alone wouldn't fix, wearing a thin blouse under a cardigan that wasn't enough for a night like this, and then at the children, and then back at the woman. And then she recognized her. It came slowly, the way recognition did when you had only seen someone once, briefly, from a window. That morning, Claire had been in the kitchen when she'd heard Robert's voice on the porch, that particular tone he used when he was wrapping up a conversation he'd already decided to end. She had looked out and seen a woman walking back down the front path with 4 children behind her straight-backed, not looking around, not giving anything away. Claire had watched them get into a car and drive away, and she had stood at the kitchen window for a long moment afterward, the coffee going cold in her hand, not finishing the thought that was forming in her chest. She was looking at that woman now, standing in the cold air of Overton Park, with the high beams cutting through the dark and Lily's pale little face visible from 10 feet away. Claire understood two things at the same time: that she could get back in the car and drive home and lie awake until morning, or she could do what she should have done at 9 o'clock that morning when she'd watched this woman walk away. The woman was looking back at her with an expression that was equal parts exhaustion and wariness, and something Claire recognized from 30 years of working with children in crisis. The look of a person who had been told no so many times that yes had started to sound like a setup. "I have a room," Claire said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Come with me." The woman didn't move. Her jaw tightened. "I know who you are," Vanessa said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of facts, laid out plainly, the way you laid out facts when you were too tired for anything else. Claire didn't look away. "I know you do. Your husband. I know what my husband did." A pause. The wind moved through the branches overhead. "That's why I'm here." Vanessa looked at her for a long moment. Claire watched her work through it, could see it happening behind her eyes. The rapid internal accounting of someone who had learned the hard way that strangers offering help usually wanted something in return, or changed their minds, or meant well but evaporated when the situation got complicated. Marcus was watching Claire with the focused, unreadable attention of a child who had learned to read adults very carefully. Vanessa looked at her children. She looked at Danny, who was shivering slightly in his sleep, even under the jacket. She looked at Lily, whose lips had gone pale. She looked at Sophia curled against her side, and Marcus sitting at the end of the bench like a small soldier who had been at his post too long. "If you're going to change your mind," Vanessa said, "tell me now." "I'm not going to change my mind." Claire didn't say anything more. Instead, she stepped forward, leaned down, and lifted Lily gently, the way you lifted a sleeping child, supporting the head, and turned and walked back toward the car. The little girl stirred, blinked once at the unfamiliar face above her, and then settled back against Claire's shoulder with the absolute trust of a 2-year-old who was warm and held, and therefore safe. Vanessa watched this happen. Then she stood up. Marcus was already on his feet beside her. He looked up at his mother with a question in his face that he didn't put into words. She put her hand briefly on top of his head, the same gesture she had used when he was small, when he needed to know that whatever was happening, she was still there. "Come on," she said. She woke Sophia and Danny, took Danny onto her hip, and walked toward Claire's car. Marcus walked beside her, close enough that their arms touched. The park was very quiet around them. Above the bare branches, a few stars were visible between the clouds. She did not let herself think about what came next. She let herself take one step, and then another, across the cold ground, toward the lit interior of a stranger's car. It was the hardest thing she had done all week. The house on Belvedere Boulevard was warm. That was the first thing Vanessa noticed when Claire opened the front door, the warmth, immediate and physical, the kind that hit you in the face and the chest and made you realize how cold you had been without fully knowing it. Lily made a small sound against Claire's shoulder, something between a sigh and a word. Danny pressed his face into Vanessa's neck. Claire moved through the house with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had spent decades taking care of things. She turned on the lamp in the living room, not the overhead light, just the lamp, warm and low, and spread 2 blankets on the wide sectional sofa, without being asked. She arranged the throw pillows into something that approximated beds for the smaller children. She did all of this without commentary, without the performance of generosity that Vanessa had learned to dread, the kind that came with an audience and a ledger. Sophia and Danny were asleep again before their heads touched the cushions. Lily went down between them, curled on her side, her breathing already slow and even. Marcus sat at the end of the sofa and watched his siblings settle, and then looked up at his mother with an expression that asked permission. She nodded. He lay down, pulled the blanket to his chin, and closed his eyes. Within 4 minutes, all 4 of them were asleep. Vanessa stood at the edge of the living room and watched her children sleep in the warmth and the low light, and she felt the particular vertigo of a person who had been braced for impact for so long that the sudden absence of it was its own kind of disorienting. She didn't know what to do with her hands. "Come sit," Claire said, from the kitchen doorway. The kitchen was yellow-walled and smelled of garlic, and something herbed the remnants of whatever had been cooked for dinner earlier in the evening. Claire moved to the stove without asking, lifted the lid on a pot, stirred once. She filled a bowl and set it on the table in front of the chair she was directing Vanessa toward. Chicken soup, homemade, by the smell of it. Vanessa sat down. She looked at the bowl. "Eat," Claire said. She sat down across from her with her own hands folded on the table, not a bowl in front of her, just her presence, steady and quiet. "Not because I'm being polite, because you need to." Vanessa picked up the spoon. The soup was warm all the way down. She hadn't eaten since a granola bar at 6 that morning, broken into 4 pieces in the front seat of the car, so the kids would each get some. She had told herself she wasn't hungry. She ate half the bowl before she realized she was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears moving down her face in a steady way. The way water moved when it had finally found the crack it had been looking for. She put the spoon down and pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be," Claire said. I don't do this. I know." Claire's voice was matter-of-fact, not soft exactly, but even, the voice of a woman who had sat across from people in difficult moments and understood that what they needed was not to be fussed over. "You've been holding it together for a long time. You're allowed 5 minutes." Vanessa pressed her lips together, looked at the table, then picked up the spoon and kept eating. They sat in the kitchen without talking for a while. The house made its nighttime sounds around them, the furnace cycling, a branch moving against a window somewhere upstairs, the small ticking of a clock on the wall. Outside, the wind was picking up. "The room at the end of the hall," Claire said eventually. "It has a lock on the door, clean sheets. There's a bathroom attached." She paused. "You don't have to figure anything out tonight." Vanessa looked up at her. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out without planning. Direct and unpolished, the way things came out when you were too tired to frame them carefully. Claire was quiet for a moment. Her hands were still folded on the table. She looked at them. "This morning," she said, "I watched you walk back down my front path. You had 4 children behind you, and you didn't say a word. You just turned around and left." She paused. "I should have come outside. I didn't." Another pause, shorter. "I've been thinking about it all day." Vanessa said nothing. "I'm not trying to make up for what Robert did," Claire said. "I can't do that. I'm just doing what I should have done this morning." The clock on the wall ticked. "Thank you," Vanessa said. The words felt inadequate. She said them anyway. Robert Hale came home at 12:40. Vanessa heard the garage door from the hallway where she was standing, heard the door from the garage to the mudroom open, heard his footsteps cross the kitchen tile. She had been on her way to check on the kids one more time before trying to sleep. She stopped. She heard him stop too. A long pause, the sound of him setting down his keys. Then his voice, low and controlled. "Claire." Claire's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She had been washing the soup pot, the water still running. "They're staying tonight, Robert. We can talk in the morning." A silence that had texture to it. Vanessa stood very still in the hallway, one hand on the wall. She heard Robert walk to the entrance of the living room. She knew the moment he saw them because the footsteps stopped completely. A long pause, 10 seconds, 15, in which the only sound was the furnace and the clock and the faint breathing of 4 sleeping children. Then she heard something else. A long, slow exhale, the kind that came from somewhere deep, the kind a person released when they were looking at something they couldn't justify. His weight shifted on the floor. He stood there a moment longer than was necessary. Then his footsteps again, moving away, down the hall. The bedroom door closing, not slammed, just closed, with the particular quietness of a man who had something to say and had chosen not to say it yet. Claire appeared in the hallway. She looked at Vanessa briefly, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement, not quite an apology, more like a shared understanding of the weight of the room they were both standing in. "Get some sleep," Claire said. Vanessa nodded. She checked on the kids first. All 4 of them undisturbed, breathing slow and even in the warm living room. Danny had kicked his blanket half off. She tucked it back. Lily had her thumb near her mouth, but not quite in it. Sophia was on her back with her arms out. taking up as much space as a 6-year-old reasonably could. Marcus was on his side, facing the room, his expression completely relaxed in a way that Vanessa realized she hadn't seen in weeks. The furrow between his brows that had been there every morning recently, that small, worried crease that had no business being on an 8-year-old's face, was gone. His hands were open, not clenched. He was just asleep, fully, deeply, without obligation. For the first time in longer than she could remember, he was not watching over anyone. She stood over him for a long moment. She thought about all the nights he had sat upright, so she wouldn't have to, all the mornings he had pretended not to notice things, so she wouldn't feel watched. 8 years old. She brushed her fingers lightly over his hair and felt something in her chest go quiet. Not resolution, not relief exactly, but the particular peace of watching your child rest when they have earned it. She went to the bathroom at the end of the hall, the one Claire had pointed her toward. She ran the water warm and washed her face, and for the first time in days she looked at herself in the mirror with something other than avoidance. She looked tired. She looked worn down in ways that a night's sleep wouldn't entirely fix. But she was upright. She was here. Her children were warm and fed and sleeping 20 feet away. She dried her face. Just tonight, she told herself. It was what she always told herself, the unit of time she had learned to work in when the larger ones became too heavy to lift. Just get through tonight. Tomorrow you make the next list. Tomorrow you start again. She had started again before. She knew how. She turned off the bathroom light and went back to the living room and sat down on the floor beside Marcus's end of the sofa, her back against the cushions, her knees drawn up. She didn't try to sleep. She just sat there in the warm dark of Claire Hale's living room, listening to her children breathe, while outside, the October wind moved through the oak trees in the front yard, those same 2 trees she had looked at that morning from the front walk, when she had let herself want something for just a second before she turned around and walked away. She was still inside the want now, cautiously, provisionally, with both hands ready to catch herself if it disappeared. But she was inside it, and for tonight, that was enough.